Okay, so I just blabbed for an hour, kind of going over it and doing some research while my eyebrows were gone. Was studying really hard. So I've been asked to give my input on this missing persons case for foul play, and there's an astrologer that has a blog spot that kind of went over the different times that he was last seen and eyewitness accounts and stuff like that. First off, that astrologer needs to put dates on his charts. Secondly, especially since he can't even get the dates of the event right, and he didn't go back and remove the inaccurate information, he just added more blog ranting beneath it. That was confusing. So if that guy ever sees this, please figure out how to do your information organized a little better or something, because I'm lost. So I went off of what the police gave as the last time they saw him, and they saw him between 2 and 4 p.m. at the Circle K on the 8th of March, and the address was 5462 Stewart Street, Milton, Florida. He walked in, he had physical injuries like a black eye. He was carrying 2 bags in, and he left both bags inside the Circle K. What are those Circle K employees doing that they... First off, don't see somebody bring giant bags in the store and go, hey, you need to put that behind the counter. And maybe they did, I don't know. And then he leaves with no bags, and then they only retrieved 1. So 1 probably likely had drugs in it, give or take. Just because of the way that he was afraid that his friends kind of knew that his phone was reset to factory settings, that the person who, basically when he went missing, somebody knew where he lived, and he had enough of a heads up to try to barricade the front door with something. If it was just some random, burglary or, just act of violence, nobody would have a spider sense enough to put some sort of large furniture piece in front of the front door. So, anyway, I'm just going to look at the chart for this time frame here. I actually was doing death charts, I think, back in March. Let me see. So, I set it for March 8, 2016. That's a Tuesday, Mars Day. At 4:45 p.m. in Milton, Florida. So first off, this was when there was all kinds of crazy aspects going on, and there was a lot of casualties and everything, and I had a lot of vlog episodes that I was freaking out about this. So here what I'm looking at is we have a really, really thick, intense T-square, quite a few of them. We actually have a Grand Cross too. And then we have that huge stellium of Mercury, Neptune, the Moon, the Sun, and Chiron, and the South Node, all in Pisces. So we have those teetering on the 7th house. We have Uranus in the 8th house. And then on the opposite side, we have Jupiter, the node, the North Node. And then we have Lilith in the 2nd house. Since I fixate a lot on Lilith, I definitely want to incorporate that into this here. So basically, one thing that I've guaranteed, that I've figured out for sure, is when there's this kind of squares, like T-squares going on, or even in general, if there's some sort of hard aspects that are basically affecting Pluto, and Pluto goes over the ascendant, and there's like or even a T-square, like there's an opposition on the ascendant-descendant line, and then there's a square towards the IC, that usually signifies death. So, we are going to animate this. So right now it's at 4:45 p.m. We'll go by hours. Okay, so at 5:45, we have a perfect Grand Cross now, and we have all of those planets now that are in that stellium going into the 6th house, while Uranus is trailing at the very edge of the 8th house. Then we Well, yeah, we have Lilith opposition Uranus too. Yep, creating that T-square with Pluto. Okay. So 6:45. We have Pluto in the 4th house of... That's like the ancient rulers of death. And then we have Uranus in the 7th house, opposition Lilith, approaching the ascendant. So something happened to him. Let me see. Oh, go back. Ooh, God. Ooh, that's nasty. Oh, God. Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, isn't that perfect? So Pluto's almost exactly on the IC, Lilith is exactly on the ascendant, and Uranus is 2 degrees off from the descendant. Wow. And then Jupiter's in the 11th house of trauma. Wow. So he was either beaten brutally at 8, a little after 8 p.m. on the 8th of March, so that would have been 4, maybe 5 hours after he was seen on the Circle K footage. So after he went into the Circle K and left the bags, he was beat. He had the tar beat out of him, like really bad. And with Mars and Saturn close to each other, that would also signify getting the tar beat out of him. Wow. Okay. Let's keep moving on. Are we doing minutes still? Huh. Okay, let's skip to hours. So right now we're at 8:25 p.m. on the 8th of March. Now we're at 9:25. So 9:25 we have Lilith transiting through the 12th house of secrets. And it's still opposition Uranus, and in that T-square, actually with Pluto and Uranus. So there was some sort of secret agenda to dispose of the body in an abnormal location. Yep, that's exactly how I translate that. So, when they beat the hell out of him, they must have assumed that they killed him. Initially. And then they were, about an hour after that event happened, they were discussing or contemplating on where to dispose of the body. So, honestly, like, going off of like what that other astrologer said, he said that he doesn't think he died till the morning. And I understand why he said that, because Pluto didn't go over the ascendant until morning. But this is the stage set for somebody getting rid of evidence. I'm not saying that there's not a potential, overachiever out there that, figures out where to get rid of evidence before there's evidence to, get rid of. But yeah, it just... Yeah. We have a trine between Jupiter and Pluto also. Meaning that when Jupiter played into that, the beating thing, that would mean that they either subdued him or killed him, and in a certain area where they could have some downtime to then think about where they're going to abandon the body. 25. Lilith is going into the 11th house. And now we have Pluto in the 2nd house. And we have Uranus in the 5th house. And that's trine the MC. So they're sitting there kind of brainstorming out, trying to do creative solution to figure out how to best get rid of the body and where they should take it. Yeah. And they are immediately thinking, don't take it anywhere near the home of the deceased. Okay, so 11:25, we have Mars approaching the ascendant, and it's squaring Neptune and squaring Mercury. And then semi-square Pluto. So, if he wasn't dead with that T-square, when they were contemplating what they're going to do with it, this is where he is either hanging on for dear life, and or it becomes evident to the attackers that he's not dead. And fast forward an hour. So we're at past midnight on the 9th. Mars is now over the ascendant. Lilith is in the 10th house. Jupiter's in the 9th house. Ooh. Opposition, the sun, Chiron, the moon. So the sun's life force. And Chiron's obviously your weakness. He may have been thoroughly beaten, and they either weren't completely decided if they're going to murder him or not, and he could have potentially started having diabetic issues right now, because Jupiter does have influences with diabetes in general, and then it being opposition with Chiron and the sun, and no, Neptune's not in orbit right there, but and that's in a T-square with Saturn. That could signify some sort of weakness because of that. And it's also trine with Pluto. We have Uranus in the 4th house, which is the house of endings. Trine Saturn in the 12th house. It might actually be traumatic injury to the body. This might have been from the previous hours, that there were some sort of substantial injury or intentional malicious, blows, fatalities, attempted fatalities, whatever. I know I sound retarded right now. You know what I'm talking about. The attempts to kill him, or it could be that he was beat thoroughly and they just don't care, and he could be dying slowly. So again, I think that this might also be diabetic related too. Because he's either tied up and they're like really, really like dragging this out, or they're the worst murderers ever, or he was being tortured and beaten, and then he was having diabetic, complications as well. So let's see. 2:25. The opposition between Jupiter, the Sun, Chiron. And the node got thicker. And wait. Switch to minutes. Ooh. So look at that. Something traumatic happened to him. So Uranus being in the 4th house of endings, trine Saturn, the body, and then that's squaring Jupiter in the 9th house. So, substantial injury in a foreign place would be one thing. And then also, as we keep speeding along here, and then Uranus goes over the IC and goes over into the 3rd house. What's on here? Oh yeah, okay, here we go. So, the T-square between Saturn, Jupiter, and Chiron, specifically. Saturn's in the 11th house, so that's any kind of trauma out of your control. So he might have, I don't know if he's type 1 or type 2, but any of his injuries he might have some issues like bleeding out. It might specifically just do with his diabetes too, because Jupiter again is associated with like, you know, excessiveness and sugar and all that, and it's in the 8th house with this. So it's trine with Pluto. So basically, I wouldn't translate Jupiter as being like a foreign place that's benefiting, you know, Pluto coming and killing this person. I would definitely just think that because that's the house of disease too, that one of the contributing factors to his death was diabetic complications. I'm not saying that there wasn't foul play, but diabetic complications was definitely involved. At 2:50 a.m. March 9th, we have Pluto directly on the ascendant at 17 degrees, trining with Jupiter and the node, squaring Uranus, sextile with Chiron. Okay, so that's his weakness again. Squaring Lilith, and having aspects with Mars while Mars is in the 11th house. So, Mars would have to do with either bleeding, infection, or just vitality in general. So vitality is obviously being challenged here, and we still again have that Saturn T-square with Jupiter and Chiron. So I think at some point they were beating the tar out of him. They were deciding what they were going to do with him. They may have seen that he started to have some sort of, you know, like low blood sugar or diabetic complications, and they just sat there and let him die that way. Yep, I'm convinced. Yep, because Pluto represents disease, now it's going over the 12th house, it's still trying Jupiter, sextile Chiron, square Lilith in the 8th house. So they knew that basically they were watching him die. Yep. Yep. I could think that they would just, you know, pretend like they were hanging out with him and then call the police. Definitely he was beaten. Not just because there's evidence on footage for that, but because there were some squares going on between Venus and Mars, and it was not pretty. And just from the events that I recall happening around this time frame that I was vlogging about, like almost having a nervous breakdown about, and some of them, you know, were malicious things, and then some of them were just freak accidents, which those were even more terrifying. There were substantial injuries and casualties. Okay, so 5 a.m., 6 a.m. on the 9th of March, we now have them ascending in order this way. Neptune, which is supposed to be the spirit, spirituality, and to the assimilation with the divine. The Sun, which is the self. Chiron, which is your weakness. The South Node, which is the chromatic path soul. That's nasty. That's a nasty T-square. Yep. Oh yeah, see, look at that too. So 6:18 a.m. We have Venus going into the 11th house. Venus is associated with, you know, Taurus, Libra, the kidneys, sugar, that sort of thing. Kidneys are affected by people who are diabetic. And then we have a trine with Lilith in the 7th house, which solidifies even more my theory that they were just beating the tar out of him, contemplating what they were going to do, and then just with their luck, as they would, you know, perceive it, is that he started to have diabetic complications. Or they could have done something really awful and like made him have diabetic complications. We don't need to start fantasizing about stuff like that, because it's irrelevant. All I can say for sure is he's definitely dead. I think diabetic complications played a role into this, and I have no fucking clue where that guy's getting. That they're buried in the woods next to an interstate. But if he was that confident about it, I would have contacted the investigators. And I mean, like, I'll probably look at a map of Florida later just for the hell of it, but west of his home, near an interstate, I mean, I know that it's it's really easy to just overlook stuff. But if this astrologer, in theory, claims that this is like a graveyard area for where they apparently kill people all the time and bury them out there, how the fuck has, some wild animal not, like, dug up a carcass and, like, took a femur with them somewhere, or, some sort of person hiking or doing, survival training or whatever else? Like, how is there a graveyard next to an interstate in the woods somewhere? And then nobody's ever found anything. That's crazy. So, that, and also, too, think about this. So when it looked like that they were kind of contemplating on what they would do or where they're going to go, why would they be contemplating and sitting on that so much if it was like an already done place where they're like, no dude, this is where we buried Jimmy, this is where we buried blah blah blah, like we got this, we already know where the shovels are, we've got a place for them, that sort of thing. I'm not saying it would be that extent, but why would they have to sit down and kind of sit on it and contemplate about it if it was a reoccurring dumping ground for bodies? That just doesn't make any sense. But that's all I can say for that. I mean, by the looks of it, it seems like the dog took off way before he was dead. So, one of the people that actually took him out could have stole the dog. But yeah, not entirely sure what I was supposed to be confirming. No, he's dead, and They took him somewhere abnormal, away from his home, that nobody would, somewhere where nobody would ever think to look. And I would say that, yeah, it's definitely like, not in the immediate environment, so they went out of their way. So it would be out of their way. That's all I got.